They say justice always prevails. But what if a lie is shielded by the shadow of a general? I used to believe that doing the right thing was enough. That if I kept our equipment running perfectly, and my soldiers safe, nothing could touch me. But then one day, I was called into the battalion commander's office. There was no board, no hearing, just him with a look of regret and an order from above. And just like that, with a signature on a lie, I was suspended from duty. The reason? Negligence in maintenance procedures. A mistake I had never made. I, Ronan Hayes, a man who had dedicated his youth to the military, was now cast aside by a piece of paper. Who had made this up? And more importantly, how do you fight an enemy you're not even allowed to face? I am Ronan Hayes, Sergeant Major of the Alpha Tactical Intelligence Squad. They call me the backbone of this unit. Not because I give orders, but because I know every bolt in our equipment and every strength and weakness of the soldiers I train. To them, as it is to me, respect doesn't come from rank, but from true competence. And on the 12th of October of last year, I learned that in the military, the greatest danger sometimes doesn't come from an enemy's barrel, but from the stupidity of an officer with too much political cover. Everything started normally. Under the scorching desert sun, I was watching my team perform an infiltration exercise. Everything was in order. The clicks of equipment, the jargon exchanged over the radio, the concentration of the men I had trained since they were green recruits. We were a perfectly oiled machine. And then, that machine jammed because of a grain of sand. A very large grain of sand. Lieutenant Fletcher Vance. He was our new commanding officer, fresh out of West Point, wet behind the ears and carrying the enormous shadow of his father, General Alistair Vance. He had the rank, the power on paper, but absolutely no combat experience. And worse, he didn't know it. During the first tactical meeting, he pointed at the map and proposed a patrol route that went straight through an open valley. "This is the fastest route, saving time and fuel," he announced, his voice full of self-satisfaction, as if no one in the world had ever thought of it before. I let him finish without interrupting, then I stepped forward. "Lieutenant," I said, keeping my voice calm, "that route works on a map. But in the field, we call it the death corridor. The cliffs on both sides are ideal positions for snipers. I suggest we take the detour, 3 kilometers to the west, where there is plenty of rock cover." His eyes flashed with annoyance. He felt his authority was being challenged. But faced with the silent agreement of the entire team, he could do nothing but nod reluctantly. "All right, Sergeant, do it your way." That was the first time, the start of a smoldering chain of conflicts that followed. His textbook orders were given, and I would quietly have to adjust them. I didn't do it out of defiance. I did it to keep my soldiers alive. Every time, the frustration in Fletcher's eyes grew a little more. He began to see me as an obstacle to be removed, not as an experienced comrade. I knew something would happen. Sooner or later. I just didn't expect it to happen so fast. That fateful day came 3 weeks later. We were on a signal reconnaissance mission deep in enemy territory. Everything was going according to plan until I noticed a ghost signal on my analysis screen, a strange, faint frequency. Not in our intelligence report. Over the radio, Fletcher's voice rang out from the safe command center dozens of kilometers away, ordering us to ignore it. "It's just interference, Sergeant. Stick to the main objective." But 15 years of experience screamed in my head. That was not interference. It was a trap signal, a lure. I glanced at my team and made a split-second decision. "Alpha, change position, immediately." We had moved for less than 5 minutes when a mortar barrage rained down on the exact spot we had just left. My decision saved the team's lives. We didn't just survive. Thanks to the real signal, we tracked it, discovered, and reported a major ambush, timely saving a friendly unit that was moving into the area. When we returned to base, we were greeted as heroes. Even the battalion commander came over, patted each man on the shoulder, and squeezed my hand tighter than usual. Well done, Ronan. Your decision saved a lot of people today. I saw Fletcher standing in the distance. His face hardened. He couldn't take credit for a decision he had vetoed. My success was his failure, and he wouldn't let it go. That evening, as the team was tired but happy in the common area, a young soldier joked to the man next to him, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Good thing the sergeant was there. If we had followed the official plan, we'd be picking up our teeth right now. The whole team laughed. Just then, Fletcher walked in. It was clear he had heard everything. The smiles on everyone's faces vanished. Fletcher's face darkened. He didn't speak to the young soldier. He looked straight at me. "Sergeant," his voice hissed. "Did you hear that? That's how your soldiers talk about the chain of command. That's insubordination." I stepped up. "It was just a joke in a moment of fatigue, Lieutenant. They didn't mean anything by it." Fletcher sneered, a bitter, cynical smile. "I don't care. For your insubordinate attitude and behavior undermining discipline, I order the cancellation of Alpha Squad's entire weekend leave. You will spend that time writing reports, each of you, on the importance of respecting a commanding officer." The whole room fell silent. An absurd punishment, a slap in the face to the morale of soldiers who had just faced death. I looked Fletcher straight in the eyes. My voice was steady, unwavering. "Lieutenant, I will not carry out that order." Surprise flickered across his face, then quickly turned into undisguised fury. "What did you say?" "These soldiers just cheated death. They deserve arrest. This order is unreasonable." I repeated, every word clear. Fletcher moved closer, his face red. He lowered his voice, hissing just loud enough for me to hear. "You just disobeyed an officer. You will regret this. I swear, I will bury your career. Right here." The war had been declared, and I knew it wouldn't be settled with bullets, but with wits and preparation. He had lit the fuse, and I would be the one to end it. That night I didn't sleep. My anger wasn't hot. It was cold as ice. It didn't make me lose control. It made me focus. In my room, I opened an encrypted file on my laptop. I began to type. Date, time, event, witnesses. Every stupid order. Every time I had to correct his mistake. Every hostile look from Fletcher. It was all meticulously recorded by me. I knew the word of a sergeant was not enough to stand against the son of a general. But if the facts were documented tightly, they would carry weight. However, my files were not enough. I needed people who could corroborate it from the inside. I needed allies. The first person I thought of was Warrant Officer Anya Sharma. She was the battalion's leading technical expert, a person who valued rules and data above all else. I didn't look for her in her office. I met her where she was most comfortable, in the server room, amidst the hum of cooling fans. I didn't mention the canceled leave. I spoke her language. "Anya," I said over the noise, "I have a security concern. Lieutenant Vance has repeatedly requested direct access to activity logs, bypassing standard protocols. I need you to keep an eye on any unusual access activity from his terminal." Anya narrowed her eyes. She stopped what she was doing. Her silence was louder than the server noise. "Ronan," she said, her voice low and slow, "do you know what you're asking? This is not just monitoring an officer. This is the son of General Vance. This could end both of our careers." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Our careers will end faster if an amateur messes up the system from the inside. I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm just asking you to do your job. Protect the data." She was silent for a few seconds, then nodded decisively. "I'll monitor the logs," she replied simply. That was enough, but Fletcher was more cunning than I thought. He didn't just rely on his father's power. He started setting a trap. 2 days later, a small incident occurred. One of the long-range communication devices malfunctioned during a routine inspection. A minor issue. But when I read the report, I felt a chill down my spine. The report was signed by a young soldier, one of the best under my command. It stated that the cause of the malfunction was non-standard maintenance procedures, and that I was responsible. A blatant lie. I knew he hadn't written those lines himself. He was just a pawn. I didn't call him in. Doing so would only make him panic and let Fletcher know I had caught on to his game. Instead, I contacted Captain Elias Thorne, a lawyer with the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. We met at a small cafe outside the base. I placed the fake report on the table. "He's trying to frame me," I said. Elias read it, then looked up. His eyes were sharp as knives. He didn't seem surprised. The corner of his mouth curled into a smile that was almost imperceptible. The smile of a man who loved intellectual challenges. "Good," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Good?" "He's creating a paper trail," Elias explained. "A path leading straight to his own lies. Now we don't just have to prove he's incompetent. We can charge him with falsifying evidence. It's harder, but if we succeed, he'll have nowhere to run." He leaned back. "Let him make his moves. We'll collect. Anya handles the technical evidence. I handle the legal side. As for you, Sergeant, just do your job perfectly. Give him more rope to hang himself." I nodded. The alliance was formed. The trap Fletcher set for me was now part of a bigger trap we were preparing for him. The game had gotten more dangerous, and I was ready. The next few weeks passed in a silence as taut as a wire. Fletcher, perhaps thinking his trap had succeeded, began to grow more self-satisfied than ever. He strutted around the base with a smirk, occasionally glancing at me with a sneer. He didn't know that every action, every order of his was being recorded by 3 people, 3 pairs of eyes quietly watching. Anya worked silently, sending me encrypted files at the end of each day. Access logs, unusual requests, times Fletcher tried to intrude into systems he had no authority over. Elias, meanwhile, turned that dry data into a legal file, an indictment that was slowly being completed. As for me, I just kept doing my job. I trained the team, led them on missions, and made sure everything was done perfectly. My professionalism was the sharpest reflection of Fletcher's carelessness. And then, Fletcher decided it was time to tighten the noose. He couldn't discipline me on his own, so he played his last card, his ultimate weapon. I only knew something was up when the battalion commander called me into his office. He was a good man, an impartial officer caught in the middle. That day, he looked very tired. "Ronan," he began, avoiding my gaze. "There's an order from command." From General Vance's own office. I stood still, waiting. "They're going to launch an official investigation," he continued, his voice heavy, "regarding the allegations of negligence in maintenance procedures based on a report from a soldier in your team." He paused. "During the investigation, you will be temporarily suspended from duty." It was a heavy blow. Suspended, stripped of command. For an officer, that was a bone-deep humiliation. I just nodded. "Understood, Colonel." When I walked out of the office, the news had already begun to spread. The pitying glances, the whispers. I saw Fletcher standing in the distance, arms crossed, a triumphant look on his face. He thought he had won. That night, for the first time in weeks, my composure began to crack. I sat alone in the empty room, staring at the wall, suspended, facing a lie backed by a general. I had survived the worst places in the world, but I had never felt this helpless. For a moment, just a moment, I thought about giving up, writing my resignation letter, ending it all in silence, keeping the last bit of my honor. Just then, the door opened. Elias Thorne walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one, then sat down across from me. He said nothing, just watched me quietly. A long moment later, he spoke, his voice low and decisive. "If you give up now, Fletcher wins. But more importantly, people like him will know that family name and lies can crush the truth. We've come too far to stop now, Ronan." He looked me straight in the eyes. Anya just found something. Something big. His words were like a cold slap, pulling me out of the pit of despair. The fatigue vanished. A cold, sharp instinct rose within me. "What is it?" I asked. Elias gave a small smile. "It's our silver bullet." Fletcher's attack had landed. Now it was time for us to counterattack. And not just at him. We would aim for the massive shadow shielding him. The silver bullet Anya found wasn't in the regular access logs. It was hidden deep in the backup storage system, a place that Fletcher, with his foolish confidence, assumed no one would ever check. In an effort to beautify his personal record, Fletcher had a D tried to edit an old mission report. He changed the time parameters to make a wrong decision of his seem to have been made earlier and therefore less serious. A small act of fraud. But the problem was, that report belonged to a joint operation with the British military. And when he edited it, Fletcher had inadvertently created a data conflict with their server. Our system had automatically logged this behavior as an unauthorized access attempt on an ally's data. Alias placed a detailed printout on the table. "This is no longer about negligence or falsifying evidence, Ronan. This is an act that could endanger national security and damage Allied relations. This charge, no general can cover up." Our plan changed. It became bigger, bolder. First, I needed an external catalyst. I used a secure communication channel to send a short message to Major Isolde Finch, a British military liaison officer I had worked with for many years. I didn't go into detail, just said there was a serious internal issue affecting the integrity of joint cooperation data, and suggested she recheck the logs from their end. I knew Isolde. She was a professional, and she wouldn't ignore a warning like that. Then, we struck. The very next morning, as my suspension officially took effect, 2 attacks were launched almost simultaneously. Elias and Anya sent a thick summary report with the silver bullet on the very first page, straight to the Army Inspector General's office, bypassing all intermediate levels of command. At the same time, in Brussels, during an emergency online NATO meeting on regional security, Major Finch did something no one expected. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't talk about the topic of the meeting. "Gentlemen," her voice rang out clearly over the speakers. "As a representative of the United Kingdom, I regret to inform you that, due to serious concerns about command stability and data integrity at the 7th Tactical Intelligence Battalion, we are forced to immediately suspend all joint intelligence sharing activities until the matter is thoroughly resolved at the highest level." A bomb had exploded. A key ally publicly cutting ties in the middle of a NATO meeting was a diplomatic disaster. The matter was no longer an internal affair. It had become a crisis. The phones at the Pentagon must have been ringing off the hook. That afternoon, I received a notification. An emergency hearing would be held the next morning. Fletcher Vance, General Alistair Vance, and I. We were all summoned. The game had been pushed to its highest level. There was no turning back. The hearing room was not a courtroom, but the atmosphere inside was 100 times more tense. It was deep inside a high-security building in Washington, with no windows, only gray walls and a long U-shaped wooden table. Sitting behind that table were 3 three-star generals, their eyes cold. Their power was enough to decide the career of anyone in that room. General Alistair Vance sat on one side, his face tight, trying to appear calm, but his clenched hands under the table betrayed the self-control he tried to show. Fletcher sat next to his father, looking pale and nervous, no longer with his usual cocky demeanor. I sat opposite them, with Elias, my lawyer, next to me. Today, I wasn't in uniform. I was just a witness. The hearing began with the charge of negligence against me. Elias handled it cleanly. He didn't argue. He just requested that the young soldier who had signed the report be summoned. Under Elias's sharp but non-threatening questions and the scrutinizing eyes of the 3 generals, the young soldier broke down in tears and admitted he had been pressured by Lieutenant Vance. The game began to tilt in my favor. But Fletcher wasn't ready to retreat. When it was his turn, he stood up, trying to regain his confidence. He chose to attack. He loudly accused me that I had built a personal cult within Alpha Squad, that I was jealous and tried to suppress a young officer. He turned himself into the victim, an enthusiastic officer being hindered by an old and conservative non-commissioned officer. He even presented some skillfully fabricated fake emails, trying to prove that I had been hostile from the start. He was a good actor. The room fell silent. One general frowned, starting to review each line in the emails. That's when Elias gave the signal. "Generals," a clear female voice rang out from the doorway. "May I present some relevant technical information?" Warrant Officer Anya Sharma walked in, holding a tablet. She was not intimidated by the uniforms full of stars. To her, only data was the truth, and she began to present. She calmly exposed the digital footprints in Fletcher's fake emails. She showed the logs of him pressuring the young soldier. And then, she unleashed the silver bullet, the undeniable evidence. "Finally," she said, her voice steady, "here is the log of unauthorized access to a NATO allies server, originating from Lieutenant Vance's terminal at 2:17 on the 28th of October. This action altered a joint cooperation mission report." General Alistair Vance's face turned from red to ashen. He knew his son had gone too far. He knew the game was over. Fletcher stammered, I didn't, that was a technical error." But it was too late. No one believed him anymore. The charade collapsed. As neatly as a cold, hard hit of data, the hearing ended without fanfare. But the undercurrents it created were immense. There was no public announcement about the verdict. In the military, such incidents are often handled quietly to avoid affecting the overall image. 2 days later, I received a brief order. My suspension was lifted. That was it. No apology, no explanation, but I didn't need them. The real results came through whispers and quiet actions. Lieutenant Fletcher Vance disappeared from the base that same afternoon. No farewells, no handover ceremony. His office was empty, the nameplate taken down. I later heard he was forced into a quiet retirement, with a charge of conduct detrimental to security and allied relations, an end that could not be more humiliating for a military career. And General Alistair Vance, a week later, the Pentagon released a short press statement, announcing that he had voluntarily submitted an application for early retirement for personal reasons. The political and military career he had built his whole life was scattered to the winds just because of one wrong decision. Covering for his son, I was vindicated. But more importantly, the truth had been acknowledged. I didn't return to my old position in Alpha Squad. About a week after returning to work, the battalion commander called me into his office. "Ronan," he said, this time looking me straight in the eyes, with a respect I had never seen before. "The battalion needs a new sergeant major, a person with experience, integrity, and who knows when to fight for what's right. I can't think of anyone more deserving than you." He stood up and held out his hand. When I shook his hand, I could feel the genuine relief in that handshake, as if an invisible burden had also been lifted from his shoulders. I accepted the position of Battalion Sergeant Major, the highest non-commissioned officer position, acting as a bridge between command and all the soldiers, a role that required absolute trust. On my first day on the job, I gathered all the non-commissioned officers in the battalion. There were no long speeches. "From today," I said briefly, "here, respect is earned through competence and action, not from rank or family name. We work for each other. That's it." Sometimes I still walk past the training area, quietly watching Alpha Squad, now led by a different young lieutenant, one who knows how to listen to his non-commissioned officers. And for the first time in months, I felt my chest lighten. I thought about Fletcher and his father. They once had everything in their hands: power, family name, career. But they lost not because I was so good, but because they forgot a simple truth. True power doesn't come from the stars on your shoulder. It comes from the trust of the people who are willing to follow you into the most dangerous places. And that's something no liar can fake.